Hello and welcome back to the Armchair QBs. We took a little bit of a hiatus because there was nothing going on and we really just wanted to give you the best product possible. Let's stick with that.
No, let's also tell the truth. You want to talk about Deshaun Watson. I didn't want to have any fucking part of that.
Yeah, that as well. An entire episode dedicated to Deshaun Watson was just going to be a bit light and full of us cutting things out due to libel reasons. So we did not proceed with that. However, this week we are back. We are going to be doing our mock draft, as is the tradition. We have roped in Dave Orr, Jacksonville Jaguars superfan. I would not really be much help in this as a Texan fan. We don't have any picks for the next 7 years, so what do I know about drafting? Let's do some housekeeping first. Dan, Alex Smith is retired.
Thankfully, his leg can, at least try and recover from what it was. There was rumours that he was going to maybe be a kind of backup mentor in Jacksonville, actually, but the medical staff had a once-over on him and said, nope, don't want any part of that. And he basically kind of took that as a sign and has decided to hang it up after 16 years. I mean, I remember coming in, that was one of the very, very first drafts that we were interested in, and that was 16 years ago now. And it's just, there's no idea where it's gone, but an interesting career. Not not to the kind of echelons I think everybody thought that they might be after taking him first overall down in San Francisco, but great story to end it, and I'm glad that he's just got both his legs after the end of it.
Dave, any thoughts on Alex Smith?
Again, it's brilliant that he got back to play last year, and I'm glad we got to see him in a couple of games so he could prove that he was able to get back on the field. But I don't think you'd enjoy watching him anymore. He's not going to be able to do the same things, and it's not enjoyable watching him with rushers around his feet at all. So yeah, he should go into coaching or something. But happy for him that he's retiring.
Yeah, and next up we have the news that Mike Tomlin has just signed an extension for 3 years with the Steelers. I was a bit surprised at that because it did seem like he was on a bit of a shaky peg, but maybe this is the Steelers looking to one eye on the future with Big Ben probably stepping down at the end of this year, so maybe they need that stability.
Sorry, what? On a shaky peg? He's never had a losing season, and at one point last year they were 11-0.
I completely agree. I completely agree with this, but for some reason there's this hate towards Mike Tomlin because he's not delivered a Super Bowl.
No, I think I just saw that also that he will, if he sees out that contract, he will have been in Pittsburgh longer than
Cowher.
Yeah, Bill Cowher, yeah. See, that's how long it's been since Bill Cowher was relevant, we know we're CBS. So that's quite amazing to think that Mike Tomlin will have been coaching the Steelers longer than Bill Cowher by the time he finishes that contract.
Yeah, I like Mike Tomlin. I think he's never had a losing season, which is something that...
Where did you hear that, Cal?
I brought this up last year when I was picking him up. But it's just one of these things that I think he gets a lot of undue hate. But there was always the narrative that it wasn't really his team when they won the Super Bowl as well. It was Cowher's team. But you could say that about John Gruden. In some other housekeeping, it has now been a year that we have been doing this shambles of a podcast. So thank you to all the listeners for sticking with us this last year. This lockdown project, it just keeps on going. Heartfelt words there from Dan. Let's get on with the draft then. Last year, Dan, you did the first pick, but since Dave's Jags are so terrible and they're picking first overall, we're going to let...
Kettle.
Look, we're terrible for very different reasons, okay? Ours is off the field product. Dave, you're going to get the first pick. So who are you going to take for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Trevor Lawrence. I don't think we need to spend all that much time talking about it, do we?
It seems pretty locked in.
Yeah.
I would just ask Trevor Lawrence. Everybody's got number one. That's fine. But Dave, what's the one thing which means that he will succeed where others have failed in Jacksonville?
I mean, Jacksonville haven't had so the whole time I've seen them play. There's been no quarterback that can throw the ball like he can. I mean, you can talk about the sort of intelligence stuff and all that, but just some of these throws he makes 60 yards downfield and on a line, that's just not what we've ever had in Jacksonville. And you can obviously do everything else as well, but it's just actually quite exciting to see some of the throws and know actually Blake Bortles, as much as I loved him, called himself an unnatural thrower of the ball. It's hard to win when you can't be a natural thrower, you know? So yeah, I think you never know if someone's going to work out, but you've got literally the best chance of the last decade of having a quarterback that works out. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, last time, obviously, the last prospect that came out that people were talking about with this high regard was Andrew Luck, and he ended up being injured. So, and that's kind of taken the shine off him after only 8 seasons. So it really is a kind of, a lot of things need to go into being a successful number 1 overall pick. I mean, look at Alex Smith. He's just retired 16 years after being the number 1 overall pick, and he had a terrible initial run in San Francisco to start with. So many things need to go right. But I think overall, looking at Trevor Lawrence, it's the only pick possible for if you have the number 1 pick.
When Alex Smith came out, though, although the situation around him wasn't great, he himself was not great either. But when you look at, I mean, the Colts team the year Peyton Manning was injured was absolutely trash. They were a horrible team. And in one off-season, they got to the playoffs from a 2-win team. That's the type of impact that Lawrence could have in Jacksonville, especially when you pair it with, all the investment in defense and Urban Meyer coming in.
And then the fact that you're only really playing against 2 other teams in the AFC South.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah,
did that go for Cal's head?
I think he's just choosing to ignore it.
Yeah, I just choose. I don't care. I'm numb to it now.
That's the example I look at that I go, that's what the Jags should be aiming for. They might not. They might still get blown out in a couple of games and things, but they should be competitive in the majority of the games. And I don't think like a wild card berth is out the question just with the addition of the quarterback.
I honestly think that the Jags will make the playoffs this year. Because if you look at that division, everyone other than the Colts is worse. Right? If you look at Tennessee, they don't have Arthur Smith anymore, who was a big reason for their success. So how is that new OC going to bed in, and how is that going to work with Tannehill? Because Tannehill's only been successful with Arthur Smith. You look at the Texans, and they're just on fire right now, so they're not going to be a factor. And then the Colts, yeah, they've got their quarterback in Carson Wentz, but there's still questions around Carson Wentz. So I think that the Jags could be pushing.
Worth a cheeky 10 spot.
Yeah, I genuinely do like them. I think they'll win the division. I think it's a big ask to rebound that much, but I think a wild card's definitely in there for them.
We'll see.
Daniel, you have the second pick. The New York Jets are on the clock. Who are you taking?
I'm sticking true to my board, and I'm not believing the Zach Wilson hype, and I'm taking Justin Fields for the New York Jets. It just happened one day. It just happened one day that all of a sudden everybody said, yeah, Zach Wilson's going number 2 to the Jets. And then it was just accepted. It's never really been kind of, further probed or tested by anybody. Because he had a good season in the Mountain West playing against low-level competition. Again, I'm sorry if people say that's, too narrow-minded. I think he's a skinny, narrow frame. He's shorter than perhaps you would like. Okay, 6'2", not short for quarterbacks, but it's not the biggest quarterback. Again, I don't believe in I don't believe his athleticism is close to what people are making it out to be. I've watched a number of games, and he seems to get caught from behind a lot by Mountain West defenders who don't ordinarily make it in the NFL. So, certainly not as starters or as special athletes. So I appreciate that the arm is interesting, but I think people are seeing Mahomes, Rodgers, trying to say that he throws off platform like that and can do things out of structure, and they're just projecting a bit too much. And so that's why I said previously that for me it's still Lawrence, and then Fields, and that's why I've kept it. And there just seems to be an acceptance that it definitely is Wilson. And if it is, fair enough. But for me, if I was making the decision, I would take Justin Fields.
Yeah, I don't know. Justin Fields, it's so hard to judge the quarterbacks in that Ohio State system. Because it's a little bit like my issue with Trevor Lawrence as well, is that he's got such great talent around him compared with the competition that he's facing, that he'll always look really good. And you can only really judge them on when they do play those big games. Fields, there was obviously issues when he was in Georgia. He wasn't able to beat out Jake Fromm. He then transferred over to Ohio State. I have serious question marks on this quarterback class past Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields. I can understand why he's slipping. I don't understand why people have Zach Wilson pegged in at number 2.
All valid criticisms, but I think just overall, looking at him as a prospect, he's a little bit safer to me. And I know safer seems to be a very kind of wide-ranging, that doesn't have a lot of meaning at the moment. But I trust his arm a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more accurate. Some people say that he's not, but I'm satisfied enough that he's accurate. He was trying to push the ball downfield a hell of a lot more than even Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Trevor Lawrence threw 87 screen passes last year. Justin Fields only threw 20. And that's where the kind of disconnect comes between people saying, oh, well, Lawrence and Mac Jones, they get the ball out quick, their processing is elite and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, that's because in their offenses, they're being given the option for those quick throws. Ohio State do a lot more kind of, mid-level, intermediate plays where it has to develop. And so that's why I'm there. I trust his athleticism in a big game against Trevor Lawrence, and all that talent. You've mentioned Calum. He managed to overcome it this year. Fair enough, it didn't really work out in the final, but I just overall, looking at the type of player that he has the potential to be, I'm happier taking Justin Fields over Zach Wilson because of what we've seen so far.
Okay, Dave, any thoughts on Justin Fields?
I agree with the pick. I think he's the number 2 QB.
Yeah, no, and I think it is worth just reiterating our rules for doing this mock draft. This isn't necessarily where we think people will be going. This is who we would be picking as well, that we put into this. So just when you see things, like last year, if you go back and listen, Dan was very low on Tua, and it was proven correct.
For a year, certainly.
Yeah, for a year. So let's continue. So number 3, we had a blockbuster trade, and San Francisco came up. So, Dave, who do you see them taking?
I know Dan's a bit of a conspiracy theorist with the Niners trading up, but to me, there's absolutely no way they don't go quarterback here. And I think a bit disappointing that Fields went rather than the sort of penciled in pick of Wilson that everyone has. But I still think Wilson's the 3rd best QB, so it's Zach Wilson for me.
Okay. I do agree. I think Zach Wilson's the 3rd best, but I think this QB class has been very overhyped. And what we need to remember as well is that I was listening to Chris Sims on Ryan Russillo's podcast, and he was making the point that out of these 5 quarterbacks, realistically, 2 are only going to make it. So it's just who's going to be the busts and out of this crop. And when you consider that so many are being taken, it's projected that we're going to have 3 gone in the first 3 picks. Like 2 teams are going to be left with egg on their face, realistically, I think.
Yeah, but it's the way that these things kind of all align. It's what players are actually coming out, who's in the draft pool, then the draft order, then the needs, and seeing where teams have to address it. So it definitely, everybody wants to talk about new quarterbacks coming to the league. That's just the media narrative. That's where the clicks are. That's where the drive is. People want to know what their team's doing at quarterback because it's such a quarterback-centric league and game now. And I've already kind of listed that personally, if I had the choice for my rankings, obviously Lawrence would go within the first couple of picks, and then it would be a case of Fields within 10 to 20, Wilson and Jones between 20 and 30, and then maybe Trey Lance to kind of nick up into that late first round, kind of early second round, because of his basic, the unknown about Trey Lance, and it's so much of a projection for him. So, the fact that the 49ers have traded up into this spot has obviously made it go 1, 2, 3 for quarterbacks, and that has a knock-on effect, a butterfly effect in the rest of the draft as we go on. But I, again, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I have ideas as to, what the 49ers could do to completely confound the expectations all the way, and that really means kind of trading down another couple of times in between before they get back down to 12, and collecting more draft capital and, just basically biding their time for the player that they want. They don't need to go after a quarterback, but it seems as though that's the decision they've made, to go after a quarterback. And they must have known through their back channel connections with the Jets that quarterback's definitely coming 2, and they need to get to 3. And then, of course, Sam Darnold goes, so it all plays out in the way that we anticipate. So I think it has to be Wilson at that stage, because I certainly would be. None of us really think that Mac Jones is worth the 3rd overall pick.
I don't think he's worth it, but I think it's Mac Jones that they take.
But you just said you thought it was Wilson.
No, on this, I said that Wilson. I said Wilson's the 3rd best quarterback, but I guarantee you, San Francisco take Mac Jones.
Right. Well, that's a good little nugget to get out then.
I'm positive it's going to be Mac Jones, because the narrative that's been coming out from the media personnel that are close to Shanahan have all been bigging up Mac Jones, and they're all adamant that it's Mac Jones. You've got Chris Sims, you've got Lombardi, people that talk to Shanahan regularly and think highly of him, and I think are getting fed information from Shanahan, are telling you it's Mac Jones.
It's lying season. It's lying season.
But it does them no benefit to lie about that. Anyway.
I think you'd have to feel really strongly about Mac Jones to trade up to 3 for him, though. That's unless you think other people are going up for him, and if you didn't. But yeah, that's the. If the Niners were sitting at their original spot and maybe had Mac Jones and Wilson available, you could maybe understand it more. But that move up so early before the draft, yeah, I'd be very shocked if it was Jones.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's Mac Jones. If I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be wrong. But I think they're going to be. This is going to be the dumb move that finally gets Shanahan fired.
So you win either way.
Yeah,
you win if it's Mac Jones, and you win if it isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on. Number 4, Atlanta Falcons are on the clock.
Yeah, a lot of people have a quarterback going here as well, but I think that Matt Ryan, despite having a bit of a down year, they were sneaky okay. The Falcons, they lost a lot of one-score games. I think at this point they don't need to kind of bother themselves too much about a quarterback. In my opinion, a lot of people have Lance going here if they do take a quarterback, but I just think that they say let's make ourselves absolutely explosive on offense in the new generation NFC South. No Drew Brees, no Cam Newton, and Tom Brady's in there. Let's make ourselves really, really explosive, and we take the biggest physical freak that there is available, and we take Kyle Pitts from Florida, tight end.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. Many have him ranked as actually the second best player in the draft. So, yeah, I like that one. Cincinnati at 5, Dave?
To me, it's a simple choice between 2 players, and Pitts went at 4, so I think it goes to the tackle now, and it's Sewell. I think the idea of protecting Burrow is now even more clear than it has ever been to them after what happened last year. He just got absolutely battered. So I think taking the best tackle in the draft and a top 5 player makes too much sense here.
If Burrow hadn't got injured, I would be saying Chase. But the fact that Burrow got injured, that's what sways me towards Sewell as well. It's just you can't draft someone number 1 overall, have him be as so under pressure and hit so many times as he was in his rookie season last year, and then cause a potentially problematic knee injury, and then not upgrade your offensive line. I would really like the dream scenario of Chase going there, but I think you have to get Sewell.
Okay. Number 6, Miami.
And I've just mentioned him. The Dolphins moved back up, obviously, from 12 to 6 with the trade with the Eagles. And I think that's probably that they figured that this was the area where they would get the choice between Pitts, Sewell, or Jamar Chase. And I have them selecting Jamar Chase, wide receiver from LSU. Widely considered to be the best wide receiver in this draft. However, much like with a lot of the position groups this year, it really is just what takes your fancy. There's different skill sets for different teams, but I just think overall what he did with his body, his physicality, his ability to run after the catch, he was just really, really dynamic. And if he came out last year, he would have been taken ahead of Justin Jefferson. And look what Justin Jefferson did in the NFL. So I just think it all translates that he will elevate his game in the NFL. And Miami have managed to get a big playmaker for Tua, which leaves him very, very, few places to go if he's not able to, work well with a talent like Jamar Chase.
No, makes sense. Dave, Detroit are at 7.
To me, they need some sort of offensive playmakers, and with Chase and Pitts gone, it comes down to one of the Alabama wide receivers to me, and I actually prefer Waddle to Smith. I think, although we had a cracking season, Heisman winner, that size of maybe 170 pounds, I don't think he'll have seen press corners the same. I know the SEC is the best competition you can have in college football, but I don't think that matches up with what you'll see in the NFL. And the adjustment period is going to be tough, I think, for him. He's just so small. So I think Waddle is a more balanced prospect, and I think can contribute right from the get-go for Detroit.
Okay. Number 8, Dan, Carolina.
Certainly one which, if before the trade for Sam Darnold, you would be saying they would be all over a Mac Jones or a Trey Lance or something like that. But now that they've made that not just a trade, but that financial commitment to Sam Darnold, I think that they have to go tackle. It's their most glaring need, and I haven't taken Rashawn Slater to tackle at Northwestern.
Okay. Number 9, we have Denver. And so this is another slot that people have earmarked potentially for a quarterback. Dave, how do you see them going?
I do think it will be a quarterback, unless other people go before, but I think it's going to be Trey Lance. And that's, I don't think they necessarily need him to play right away, which could be good for him after sort of missing most of the season last year. But I think the upside is there for him, and I think Elway's is going to like him.
Okay, I mean, big question marks. He's definitely a project, but it's another weird one because they took Drew Lock as a project, and now they will go on to Trey Lance potentially at this one as well.
Yeah, and he is a project, but I think he's starting at a higher point than Drew Lock did. In terms of how you're judged before you get into the league. I think the upside is higher as well, so it is a bit risky. But it could be something that pays off massively if it does work out.
Can I say that now that he's gone, I think in reality terms, Washington are sitting there at 19 hoping that Trey Lance gets to around about kind of 14 and they can make a trade with Minnesota to get up and maybe take him. I think Washington have got their eye on Trey Lance significantly, and I've not heard a lot of buzz about that, but I can see a lot of similarities with Cam coming out, the transition and progression that they were able to get out of Cam in Carolina, and it's essentially kind of Carolina light just now in Washington. And I think that Trey Lance is going to be very, very appetizing to them.
What I think is going to be interesting is if San Francisco do the stupid thing and take Mac Jones, what had the scramble that was going to go for that 4 slot, and Miami's 6 pick.
Oh no, I can certainly agree with that. I think that there'll either be almost no now that Carolina have made that trade for the quarterback and they don't require it. There'll either be no movement in the kind of top 10 because everybody's quite happy to take one of the best players available. and we've already had that traded from San Francisco to 3. Or, as you say, if Mac Jones is taken at 3, Carolina can auction the pick. Cincinnati theoretically can auction the pick, but I think they probably stay. Miami have already shown that they're willing to move. I mean, the Lions are no man's land. They can kind of move back and continue to collect, lots of picks like they have because they are in full rebuild mode. And even the Panthers, now that they've secured Sam Darnold, they could be available for a trade up. So if Mac Jones goes at 3, you could be right, Calum. It could be absolute carnage in between that kind of 4 to 10 range, just people trying to get up for one of these quarterbacks.
Let's root for chaos. Dan, you've got the 10th pick in Dallas.
I do, and as much as I think that Jerry Jones loves Kyle Pitts, and he would be one of those teams maybe scrambling to get into the top 10 if chaos reigns, I've stuck for a relatively bland pick of Patrick Surtain, the cornerback out of Alabama. Bad defense last year. They've got good enough starters on most of the offense. It's two the top 2 tackles have gone. I just think there's more value in taking one of the top cornerbacks at this stage.
Okay. Dave, you've got the Giants.
I think the Giants need more help on defense than anything else. And I really like Micah Parsons to the Giants. Sort of clearly the best off the ball linebacker in the draft, and really versatile. So I think he'd be a valuable addition there.
Okay. 12, we have Philadelphia, who swapped with San Francisco to get this pick.
Miami.
Oh yeah, sorry, but San Francisco's
pick originally.
Yeah. So we've got Philadelphia picking at 12.
Yeah, I struggled with this one because I actually wanted to take Micah Parsons because I wanted to give. I've been desperate to give Philadelphia a linebacker for the last 2 years. I tried to give them Kenneth Murray last year, and I wanted to give them Micah Parsons this year, and I thought 12 was around about the right kind of spot and value for him, given that he plays one of the more devalued positions. But he's gone a pick before David Gettleman, the bastard, took him. And we've got the Eagles as a reclamation project. Again, I think they're prime candidates to move down and collect even more picks because they've got as much of a rebuild on their hands as the Lions do. But I've taken Devonta Smith here. Jalen Reagor, whether it work out or not, I don't know. But I think that I would just prefer to kind of get some insurance at the wide receiver spot, give myself some more explosion. He is slight. He does have the movement skills to, in my view, kind of get off press coverage and be a threat down the field. And if you're getting anything close to vintage Deshaun Jackson out of Devonta Smith, then I think we'll be happy with him at 12.
Okay. 13, we've got the Chargers of Los Angeles.
So the Chargers are in a bit of an awkward spot where they've got a glaring need at left tackle and haven't done anything to really address it. There's a couple of teams like that in the draft where they've done nothing to really shore up the position before the draft. Short of a sort of Orlando Brown trade with a swap of picks or whatever, the Chargers really do need to take a tackle. And luckily, Darisaw is still there. So that's the pick for the Chargers, and I don't think we have to think about it too much.
Okay. 14, Minnesota.
Again, much like Philadelphia, I've ended up with a team that I think will be desperate to kind of trade down and perhaps pick up some more picks because this is a real no man's land of the draft at the moment. The position groups that are available, all the top players have already kind of gone, and then it's really kind of what do you think fits your scheme best? There's no real one outstanding edge rusher. There's no real one outstanding cornerback. There's no real one outstanding kind of defensive interior player. So I again think the Vikings are prime candidates to move down. I already, if I was doing my own mock, would have Washington coming up to 14 to pick Trey Lance, but they've already tried to address edge by a trade for Ngakoue last year. Didn't work out. Mike Zimmer says this was the worst defense that he's ever had in his coaching career. So I don't think that there's any chance that they go anywhere other than defense first this year. And I have them taking Kwity Paye, the edge defender from Michigan.
Okay.
Bit of pass rush off the edge. So it's all we can really ask for at Minnesota at the moment.
15, we've got New England. Will New England stay in this position? That's the big question.
if they do, I don't think they're going to go for Mac Jones, which is a sort of trendy pick if he does fall down there.
Mac Jones is Dave's tour this year.
Yeah, it's a similar argument Calum used about the level of competition and versus the talent you have around you. You know, when you're thrown to such great receivers with the best offensive line in college football, it's easy to look good. And I just feel that Mac Jones is going to be overdrafted. And I don't think Belichick is going to be someone that puts as much value on a quarterback as some other coaches. You know, he's got the job security that I think if he has to go another year with Cam because he doesn't get a QB, he's not going to lose his job. So I don't think he's going to reach for one. Whether he should or not is a different story. But I think they're going to end up going with JC Horn. I think press corners in New England, they play so much press like man coverage that you can never have enough of those guys. And I think that's where he'll end up going.
Okay.
I think New England are just going to kind of, give up the ghost, really, I think, on a first-round quarterback. And I think that any one of the kind of second-round quarterbacks, the boy from Stanford Wilson, David Wilson, Calum Mond, and that kind of second-tier quarterbacks, I think that's where you're going to see the Patriots kind of, dip their toe into the water of the quarterback pool, much like they did for Jimmy Garoppolo, that second round area. Kyle Trask, I think he might be a big kind of ask for New England, or kind of in the middle of the second round.
Okay. 16, Arizona.
Yeah, they've kind of a lot of moving parts for Arizona this year, but defensive interior, not got a lot of depth there, and a number of the top wide receivers have gone. They've already addressed their offensive playmakers really in the off season. So I've taken Christian Barmore, the D tackle from Alabama, for Arizona. Vance Joseph can ruin him as well.
Well, yeah, this will be an interesting season, I think, for Arizona. I think this is one where they really need to get results. I don't know how patient they're going to be with Cliff. This could be make or break. How fair that is, I don't know. All right, moving on. Las Vegas.
I think the Raiders are pretty gutted that Barmore goes just before, because that's the ideal pick for them. I think it's, there's not that much defensive tackle depth other than him, and it's a bit disappointing that he goes one pick before. If he's away, I don't think there's any other defensive tackles that are worth the pick. So we're probably looking for a playmaker in the secondary. I think Caleb Farley is just a bit too risky for the Raiders. I think they need someone to come in and contribute right away. So Trevon Merrick, I think, is the right pick for them here.
I got to say that, we've kind of had shows on and off. We've not really had time to touch about the Raiders, but they are the only team that seem to have invoked a self-imposed rebuild. They've got rid of their whole offensive line, essentially, four or five. They've got rid of two of their kind of defensive line, both draft picks from the first kind of John Gruden era, and I have no idea what they're doing. It's like they've essentially decided that they have to completely tear apart their team and rebuild it in the mold of the Kansas City Chiefs. Who knows whether Trevon Moore makes them better if he does, but I can see again the tendency for Mayock to seemingly pick kind of college final playoffs and Alabama players, and Caleb Farley might be worth the risk here. So I'm with Dave on that.
Okay, Miami have their second pick. At 18, who do we see them taking?
Yeah, I've been a little bit kind of boring here again. I think this is no man's land, and I think that there's going to be so much movement around about this period of the draft for teams identifying certain players that they definitely want to go up, that we're kind of almost handcuffing ourselves here by sticking with the draft order. But that's what we do, and it's the custom Calum, and as you know, we always stick to custom. So they've a little bit kind of they've got addressed offense first off at pick number 6. So I'm just going to flip-flop and go to defense here. They kind of got rid of Kyle Van Noy, maybe looking to get younger, more athletic. So I'm having them taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, linebacker of Notre Dame. again, kind of, second tier off of Micah Parsons for off-ball linebacker, the edge rush, just makes him a little bit more dynamic on defense.
Dave, you're next at 19, and it's the Washington football team.
I think that having Mac Jones fall down this low, lower than many projections, is actually quite ideal for Washington here. They don't need him to play right away until they get a 5-pick Fitzmagic game. I think they are the type of team that will spend a slightly higher pick than they probably should on a quarterback, because they need to make that splash, and they want to keep that energy around their team. So I do think that Mac Jones, if he fell, would be an ideal pick for Washington.
Number 20, Chicago.
Yeah, again, Chicago, difficult to see where they really want to address, because whilst they've got not a lot of stars, they've got some actually, it's not a terrible roster. But thinking about their offensive line, I said to Dave, who the hell are their tackles? And he couldn't name them either. And as far as I can tell, they've got kind of, former guard Jermaine Ifedi from Seattle, sticking at tackle just now. So they need to go tackle. I've got them taking Elijah Vera-Tucker for USC, who is a PFF darling. Not so much the regular media, but PFF love him.
Okay. We now have Dave and Indianapolis.
So this is where I think Caleb Farley actually lands, if he gets this far. Indy really do need tackle help. They're in a really sort of similar situation to the Chargers, but there's just no one worth it at this point, especially with Vera-Tucker going, again, 1 pick before my ideal slot. And I think that the Colts can get by without Farley this year if he does need that extra time to recover. They don't need to press him into action straight away. But he's worth the risk at this point, because he's potentially number 1 corner if he's healthy. And I think that would really help their defense if they were able to get him. And I think the drop off to, if they were to go with the edge rusher here, they can get fairly similar value by the end of the second round, whereas the corner is going to drop off by that point.
Okay.
I think this is also the exact range where you've got the Colts, Tennessee, the Jets, Steelers, and Jags, a 5-run stretch where they're all potentially desperate for offensive line help. And we've got the Ravens sitting at 27 with Orlando Brown Jr. wanting to go play left tackle for somebody. I think that's a little bit of trade bait that might be used for if the Ravens just want to jump up rather than give out future picks. They might just flip Orlando Brown Jr. for moving up a couple spots and get back a 4th in return or something like that, depending on if they're really, really keen on a guy. But we've got to remember that there's always some players out there on the fringe that can be flipped on draft day, and it's a question whether you want kind of, Orlando Brown Jr. who's shown that he can play left tackle. Not a lot of a sample size, but more of a sample size than any of these guys coming from college. And I think that, the Colts they've traded first-round draft picks before, but it's going to be difficult for them to say that they're going to give up their first-round draft pick for Orlando Brown. So maybe a flip-flop might be on the cards there.
Okay. Do you think that's enough for Baltimore to only move up 5 or 6 spots, though?
I think it really depends how it plays out. If they've got someone that they really, really love, but they don't want to give up a first-round pick next year, which is not what the Ravens do, and they've got a disgruntled tackle, they're bringing in Villanueva to kick the tires on him as a potential replacement. If it's a case of we'll flip-flop first-round picks, give you Orlando Brown, and we'll maybe take something back in the form of a second next year or a third, whatever, some sort of package. I don't think that's an out of the realm possibility.
Obviously, I think they'd have to give something else going back to the Baltimore, I think, though, right?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So, no, it wouldn't just necessarily be a flip-flop and Orlando Brown Jr. We would need something else, but it's one of those kind of, real kind of, who wins the trade? Well, you jump up 4 picks, you flip-flop picks, they get a player that they want, and maybe we get something back. It's one of those things, but there's a run of 5 teams there that really want to tackle, and who knows how desperate they are, and who knows how it all works out. But Orlando Brown Jr. I think has to be considered in the pool of tackles at this stage in the draft.
Okay. So next up we have Tennessee at 22.
Yeah. despite going offensive tackle last year and it being potentially one of the all-time worst draft picks ever, off the team within a year and potentially out of the NFL within a year. Their defense and pass rush was atrocious last year. It really, really hampered them in being a proper kind of playoff team. And everybody knew that's what their weakness was. So I think they got to go pass rush. There's questions about Jalen Phillips from Miami, concussions, injuries, dropped out. Did he like football? Was at Dave's UCLA actually, quit football, then came back, transferred to Miami, had 11 sacks last year. So he's an athletic freak, and he's more athletically gifted than his college teammate Gregory Rousseau, who will go later. But Jalen Phillips is someone who can potentially give them the rush off the edge and the pressure that Clowney just was never able to give them last year.
Next, we move on to pick number 23 and the New York Jets.
So I think here the Jets just need any and all help on defense. Whoever they have as the highest rated defensive player, and for me that's Greg Newsome out of Northwestern. He's just the highest rated corner that I have left, and I think that's absolutely where they need the most help.
Okay, 24 Pittsburgh. Some reports saying that they were looking to go running back in the first round. Dan, how do you see them going?
I think they have to address their offensive line first. There's some good reports that show the last kind of 4 years that since Le'Veon Bell was at his peak, they've kind of dropped steadily in the kind of rushing grades and rankings and production. And that's more. I mean, they've had John Connor since then, and they've had a turnover on the offensive line. So to me, they have to be better on the offensive line. And again, they're not going to take Orlando Brown Jr. from the Ravens. So maybe I've misspoke previously about that, because I don't think we're going to send him over to Pittsburgh. But Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State's available. Again, it's a tackle, and it's really about which one you prefer at this stage. But I've got them taking Tevin Jenkins, and I think they need to upgrade their offensive line, solidify it. They like Stanford players. They had lots of success with the Castro a couple of years ago, but I think still just at this stage, Tevin Jenkins is a better player than Walker Little.
Okay. Dave, the Jacksonville Jaguars have a second pick here at 25. What direction do you see them going?
Hopefully not one that I'm picking here, because unfortunately I've picked all the players I like before this pick, so there's none of my favourite ones left. So we're hoping it doesn't quite play at this on a week on Thursday. But to me, it's too early for tight end. It's the biggest hole in the team, but there's just no one worth it here. There's been a run on tackles, so it's not worth what's there. I don't see wide receiver. It's quite a popular pick among some of the mock drafters, because Myers talked about wanting speed, but I don't think he necessarily means at the wide receiver position. I just think he wants the whole team to be faster. So to me, it goes then to edge rush, the movement of the 3-4 predominantly. So I think they want some sort of moving pieces that they can use for different pass rush situations, and that's where I think Jason Noe will be valuable. He hasn't had a lot of sacks necessarily, but I think he can really rush from some different spots and will be a nice piece to add.
Can I give you an alternative pick from my conspiracy theory book?
Go for it.
Kadarius Toney out of Florida. He shouldn't go in the first round. Shouldn't go in the first round.
It's just this thing where the Jags they've picked one too many Florida players in the past, and it's just this thing where they always go, oh, they'll pick this player, they'll pick that player, and it's just every good player in Florida is picked. I think maybe at 33 you pick Toney, maybe even 45 if he falls through there, but wide receiver is not the need on the team that needs to be addressed. You've got at least 3 guys that will be playing in front of him in his first year, and there's just so many more holes on the team. I'd just be disappointed if it was him. I'd be happier with him than Rondale Moore, who they've talked about at the Jags pick, and that really would disappoint me. But yeah, I'm not a Toney fan.
I just see poor man's Percy Harvin, Urban Meyer, Dan Mullen. I just see it all a little bit too connected, and him looking at that kind of player, that type of skill set, and saying, I've had success with that before. I don't think you'd really kind of. I mean, I suppose Laviska Chenault is really kind of in that kind of
He's Harvin. He's a bigger Harvin. He's not. He can play at running back. He can play wildcat quarterback. He's not got the absolute top end speed of Harvin, but I think he's just as versatile. Like, they just need to use him in some different ways. I mean, he has potential to be brilliant. The number of times he was actually tackled last year was ridiculous. Like, he more often than not just got forward progress calls because there's 4 defenders trying to run at him. He's big enough to play running back as well. And I could see him, that sort of Harvin or Cordell Patterson, sort of just a bunch of different places on offense. I don't think you need to go with a Tony in that spot, because you would take Laviska off the field if you drafted Tony.
But what's better than one poor man's Percy Harvin? And that's two poor man's Percy Harvin. No, I'm just that's
giving up 40 points a game.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to maybe put the jeepers up here, because I can see that potentially happening, and I think that would be a mistake myself. But I've thought about that pick 25 a lot for the Jags. I don't know. I think maybe you're right. Maybe kind of early second round, you might be more danger of that.
Yeah, I think especially in this draft we've got here, we've not really taken a lot of the wide receivers. So you're starting that run. I think there will be a run of the receivers from late first to early second, and you're starting that, but you're taking him above guys that we've got left on the board in this situation. It wouldn't be a fan of that, to be honest.
Guaranteed to happen then. Good.
Yep, smashing.
Okay, let's move on. Cleveland, the factory of sadness. Who are they picking?
Well, the exact same reason that I say Tennessee took an edge rusher is pretty much the exact same reason that I'm taking an edge rusher for Cleveland. They overall as a roster are pretty solid. They're pretty good. And they've just added Jadeveon Clowney, but I don't trust Jadeveon Clowney as far as I can throw him now, regardless of the fact that he gets $10 million every year. He has an injury history. He hasn't been productive, and I think that you get a little bit of insurance as to how Clowney's going to produce. Maybe even kick him inside on kind of pass rushing downs. I know it's a lot to spend for a kind of third down interior pass rusher, but you can maybe get yourself your own version of Clowney, an explosive athlete from Gregory Rousseau, the edge defender of Miami. He is a little bit stiff, but I think he's a big, nasty player, and has the ability to be a bookend for Myles Garrett. And if Clowney doesn't pan out, then you've given yourself a little bit of insurance. But looking at the Browns overall, they're pretty solid. They can go in so many directions. This is just one option that they could possibly go in.
Okay, 27, Baltimore.
So it's always a good shout to expect Baltimore to go defense first, and keep that being the strength of the team. But I don't think they can go into a season with those wide receivers being their starters, and they can't be happy with that, no matter how often they say they are. So we've got Rashad Bateman still on the board here, so I think that's the pick for me at 27.
Yeah, Dave asked me if I would have any difficulty when taking a wide receiver, and I've been following it very, very closely just now. I mean, DaCosta got very prickly when people were criticising the state of the Ravens wide receivers. So I don't think it's a guarantee that Baltimore take a wide receiver. I personally would like them to take a wide receiver, but I appreciate at this stage of the draft, the drop-off between the Tier 1 and Tier 2 wide receivers are starting to get in there. And it's getting a little bit difficult. I can see them going corner, getting a bit old at corner, despite the fact that they've kind of upped Jimmy Smith. I mean, he's got a 1-year extension, and is coming towards the end of it, so they could potentially go corner here. But if they took Jalen Phillips or Gregory Rousseau, I would be delighted. But again, that's just being my own homer, seeing what they can do and knowing that we are eventually going to need pass rush. But they've already gone by this stage in our view. So, yeah, I mean, Rashad Bateman's he's a little bit shorter than people thought when he got tested at his pro day. So he's a little bit shorter and smaller than people thought, but he's kind of good skills, good production, and I certainly wouldn't be too upset if that's the direction that Baltimore went.
Okay, right. 28, New Orleans.
Again, I was kind of doing this on the phone as I was driving somewhere, and I had to ask Dave. I said, Dave, who are the New Orleans wide receivers? And you would be surprised. After Michael Thomas, there's nobody. There's nobody that you would trust as a basically standing starting number 2. So the fact that you say New Orleans might not necessarily be a wide receiver, I think you'd be wrong if you say that. So I've got them taking Terrace Marshall Jr., the Louisiana kid in Louisiana.
Okay. 29 Green Bay. Chance for them to really piss off Aaron Rodgers and take another quarterback here just for a bit of fun. But how do we see them going, Dave?
Well, they're actually going to be nice to Aaron Rodgers and help protect him a little bit. I think, although there's most of the highest caliber tackles have gone, everyone else has got some sort of asterisks on them. I think Walker Little is, although he's only played once in the last couple of years after sitting out and being injured, he was really good before he got hurt, and I think this is an ideal spot where if he doesn't start straight away, he's going to get a chance to sort of get back into football shape and sort of acclimatise to the league. I think it's a good landing spot for him because they're not going to rush him in Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay don't play their draft picks anyway, so I think it's a perfect pick. I think Dave's hit right on the money.
Okay, and next we move on to everybody's favourite lovable losers, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, desperately tried to force myself to have them take a running back. I haven't gone down that route. They try and replace Levi Wallace every year, and this year they're doing it by drafting Asante Samuel Jr., cornerback out of Florida State. If you like bloodlines and you believe the upper end analysis on what you can do at this stage in the draft, you can never have too many corners, and I think he's at this stage right for the Buffalo Bills.
Okay, Dave, you have the Chiefs pick at 31.
So it's not an ideal spot to be in. The last time we saw the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes was running for his life because they just could not do anything to protect him, and they haven't addressed anything at all in free agency. They've let their 2 tackles go. Both were injured and probably not able to play at the start of this year anyway, but they're both off the team now. So they're in the unenviable position of having to reach for a tackle because there's just, if they don't take one here, they're not going to get a starting caliber player at the end of the second round. So I've got them going with Alex Leatherwood. Struggles a little bit in pass protection just because he's so big, but if he can help the run game in KC, that could be massive for them as well.
Okay, and we finish up with the Super Bowl champions, Tampa Bay. Dan, you have the honours. Who do you see them taking?
A team that returns 22 starters out of 22 can go in any direction they want. That seems to be the kind of theme from teams that I've been picking for Cleveland. So I really didn't want to do it, and I know you'll chastise me for it, Calum, but I decided to give them a kind of pass-catching running back, and I gave them Najee Harris. He was a 3-down back with Alabama, really big in the screen game, big in the run game. I think he's going to be somebody that Tom Brady is really going to appreciate bringing in, given that you've got Ronald Stonehands Jones and Leonard Fournette there. So I think Najee Harris basically will supplant one of those two, and they'll be looking for a job come beginning of the season.
I don't mind taking a running back at 32. I think at that spot, it's just where can you get value. I'm interested Harris over Etienne. I think they're basically flipping a coin at that point.
It's really just his added value in the pass game. I mean, you got to remember in that LSU game that we covered all those months ago at the very, very beginning of this lockdown project, Calum, he was instrumental in the pass game. So he's shown that over not just that game, but a number of games. And again, I think he is an upgrade in that regard to the running back room of Tampa Bay, and they could go in any direction they want. But I think that's one of these kind of luxury picks, much like the Chiefs had last year for taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is just a luxury pick for them at 32.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, gentlemen, that wraps up our mock draft. It'll be interesting to see how we actually do when the draft actually takes place next week. We can come back and wrap up and chastise all the GMs for their picks compared with ours. We'll pencil that one in. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we get out of here?
No, just I was really surprised by the amount of teams that we got to which we were desperately trying to find tackles for. I mean, we got 7 going in the first round. I think that's probably a bit too much, quite frankly, but it's one of these ones where the teams just are desperately needing offensive line help. And it's strange when you actually look at all, the states of the offensive line and some of these teams that they are so desperate for it because we don't really think about it during the season. But it'll be interesting to see if there's any other kind of interiors taken rather than just tackles. And that's really more what I was looking at.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dave, for joining us once again and continuing.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. And we will be back next week. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, over the past year as well. Goodbye.
Grand.